Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 295. We're going to cover Luke chapter 4 and 5. Now, we've emphasized Luke's desire to focus on the humanity of Christ, and with him being a Gentile, he focuses on things that are uniquely Gentile and how Jesus went to the outcasts and the least of these. There was an incident in chapter 2 where they were in Jerusalem for the Passover, and Luke gives an insight to Jesus' life when he was 12. We don't get this anywhere else. And as the parents were returning, Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. And come to find out, after 3 days, he was in the temple sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And people were astonished at his understanding. And when he was questioned by his parents, he said, "Did you not know that I had to be in my father's house?" And that's just so interesting because obviously this wasn't sin because Jesus was sinless, but the fact that he could separate from his parents. And even though they were worried, when Mary and Joseph finally find him, this is the statement that he gives. But what's interesting is we know that Mary always knew something was up with her son. Come on, she has him through a virgin birth, and she knows all of the prophecies about him. And you can imagine what's going through her mind. There's worry there, but I know also in her mind there's this mystery because she knows that her son is different. But we end it with the genealogy from Mary's line in chapter 3, and we walk into chapter 4 today. And I want to give you some insight here. This is where the synoptics start to sync back up with one another. Because remember, this is the same story from Matthew 4 and Mark 1. And it's found here in Luke 4 as well. But something interesting I want to mention to you is that Luke switches the temptations. Remember, in Matthew, he's tested with the bread, then taken to the pinnacle of the temple and told to throw himself down. And then he's led up and showed the kingdoms of the world. And I'm only saying that to show you what I've been trying to argue, that sequence and chronology isn't important to the authors. They're interested in other things, which is staying on mission with their theme. Why would Matthew switch that up? He's appealing to a Jewish audience, and the temple is very important to Jews. So his order selection may have been centered around that. I just want to get your mind thinking on why the authors order things the way they do. And another thing here that's located in verse 13, it says that when the devil had finished every temptation, he left him until an opportune time. And that verse is so enlightening to me because what it tells us is that even though Jesus passed the test, Satan was not done. He was going to be very persistent and he was not going to relent throughout Jesus' entire mission. And that should be our mindset as well, that we won't be able to control all of the encounters, trials, and temptations that we receive. But there's one thing we can control, and that's to make sure we are worshipers through it all. And we see Jesus goes into Nazareth, into the synagogue as his custom, and he reads the book of Isaiah saying, "The Spirit is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." And he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. This is Isaiah 61. And it's interesting, he closes the book right there. He closes it right at the things he wanted to accomplish in his first coming. Then if you keep reading that in Isaiah, the rest of that verse speaks of his second coming. If you go check those two things out and compare them, they're so intriguing how Christ moves the way he does throughout his ministry. Now, I want to show you something else important before we close out chapter 4 to show you how uniquely Gentile Luke's gospel is. If you look at verse 25 in chapter 4, it says, "But I say to you in truth, there were many widows in Israel in the day of Elijah, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months. But the great famine came over all the land. But yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elijah the prophet, and none of them were cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian." What is Jesus saying? Listen, you think you're the chosen people, but you're being religious bigots. The kingdom is larger than you all, the Jews. I'm going to extend my kingdom to the Gentiles. I've been showing you this all throughout history. Look at the genealogy and look who's in the genealogy. Gentiles are there. Ruth is there. Tamar is there. Rahab is there. Bathsheba is there. Look at all of the proselytes throughout the Old Testament. Even God allowed a rabble to come from Egypt with Israel, and it's been shown time and time again. And Jesus pokes at them to show how it's even been shown with Elisha. And let me show you how big of bigots they were. Just the statement alone that Jesus is saying the gospel is not just for the Jews. It's for the Gentiles as well. It's for the whole world. I want you to look at how much hatred is in their hearts. This is worse than Jonah, how much they don't want the gospel to go forth to other nations. Listen to what happens right after. And all the people in the synagogue were filled with rage as they heard these things. And they got up and drove him out of the city and led him brow the hill on which their city had been built, in order to throw him down the cliff. But passing through their midst, he went his way. They want to kill this man just because he says the gospel isn't for you only. I want you to recognize not only that, but I want you to see the things that Luke chooses to highlight so I can help you see that he's really focusing on not only accurate history like we've seen before, but also the humanity of Christ. Then we get some more similar stories. The demons are cast out. Peter's mother-in-law is healed. And we close out in chapter 5 with the first disciples being called, the leper cleansed, the paralytic healed, Matthew the tax collector called, Jesus eating with sinners, and teaching on fasting. And that's all I have for you today. But I really want you to take that encouragement away to understand, listen, every day of your life is going to be filled with a little trouble. Start preparing your heart better for that. Stop allowing trouble and trials to surprise you every day, no matter what source they come from. They're promised. Job says that we're born for trouble. Jesus says that sufficient for the day is the evil thereof. There's going to be a little trouble in your life every day. And so maturity says, let's stop being surprised about it. Let's stop marveling at it, and let's start learning how to worship God through it. Stop trying to get out of the crucible, out of the pressure cooker, and start learning how to worship the Lord in it, because these tests aren't going anywhere. We better master them now, because if we don't, all we're doing metaphorically is turning a 10-day journey into a 40-year one. And I do not want that for your life. Commit today that you will embrace trouble. You will learn how to worship through it and lead your life well with pure motives and handle it well with tact and better strategy. Learn to be more strategic with your life, and let's stop letting life happen to us. You'll never become a true, authentic worshiper if you just live life going through the motions. You gotta get more premeditated and become a ponderer like Mary and a meditator like Joshua. That's how you unlock it. You guys take care and have a good day.